Welcome to Wrapped Up Wednesdays.
What is going on, YT? It is your boy Diego, but as always, you can call me Chancho or whatever floats your boat. And I'm here with my co-host, as always, Ashley. Say hi to the people.
Hi, guys.
And welcome to what is now episode 8 of our true crime series called Wrapped Up. And today's story was actually suggested by one of our subscribers named Jersey Bites 2. Thank you so much for the suggestion. And today's story takes place in southern New Jersey in a parking lot and was actually the basis for an episode of Law & Order, the original, in 1996. Today's story started off as a carjacking or a kidnapping, but it ended up turning into something way worse. Today's story is the story of Kathleen Weinstein. And if you're new to the channel, we invite you as always to subscribe, and welcome to the only show on the entire internet where the title Wrapped Up not only describes the cases that we talk about because we know who committed the crimes, but also describes your co-host as we're wrapped up. And as always, we invite you to subscribe for a new true crime story every Wednesday.
Also on Wrapped Up, we like to have snacks. So for this week, we have decided to snack on Abuelita's hot chocolate. If you haven't tried it, try it.
It's really good. Recommendation.
Yes, because on this channel, not only do we like mineral water with goldfish, but we also like Abuelita's hot chocolate.
And once again, guys, thank you for tuning in. And if you're interested in true crime stories like Ashley and I are, then feel free to like the video. And before we get into the actual story, Ashley, can you please drop today's disclaimer?
Of course. Warning, the following contains descriptions of crime scenes and other material that some may find disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. We also want to say that we mean no disrespect to the victims or the families involved.
And without further ado and wasting any more of y'all's time, let's go ahead and get straight into today's story. Okay guys, so as always on this channel, we're going to start off the story by giving a little bit of background information on the victim as well as the murderer. So Kathleen Stanfield Weinstein was 45 years old in 1996 when this happened, and she was married to her husband named Paul Weinstein, and they had a 6-year-old son. So Kathleen lived in Tinton Falls and with her family, and she was a special ed teacher at Thorne Middle School. So students from the middle school where she worked at said that Kathleen would always urge the students to practice in random acts of kindness, so she was a very kind person. And they also remember her giving a shout out to all students for their good deeds on the school intercom in the mornings. And Kathleen had aspirations to become a school administrator one day. Now, Michael Lesane, the murderer, was 17 years old at the time of this story in 1996, so he was really, really young at this time.
Very.
Michael and his mother both lived in Magnolia Gardens, which was a small housing project. So, according to the standards of Toms River, where Michael lived at was considered to be the poor part of the town. Michael was once a student of promise in elementary school, but he started to take downward spiral while he was at Toms River High School. So in the summer of 1994, Michael was in a program that was meant for troubled youth, and in May of 1995, Michael then got into a fist fight with a police officer and he broke his own arm in the process. And leading up to his 17th birthday, Michael wanted to get himself a car, which would eventually lead to the events that we're going to talk about in chapter 2. So that was just a little bit of background information on our victim and the murderer.
So the story basically starts off as a regular day. On Thursday, March 14th, 1996, at around 3 p.m., so a little bit of a late afternoon, Kathleen, who was driving a 1995 Toyota Camry, was on her way to the chiropractic appointment. So basically, the way that the day was set up was that she was going to go ahead and go to her chiropractic appointment, and then afterwards she was going to go to Toms River High School for a graduate course that she was currently taking for the Rutgers University. Kathleen had aspirations of soon becoming a school administrator. So like I said, she was gonna go to the chiropractic appointment and then afterwards take her course for the university. Kathleen, however, decided that she was gonna go ahead and stop at a local restaurant downtown. Shortly after stopping by at the local restaurant, she went ahead and she purchased a sandwich because she was hungry. After purchasing the sandwich, she decided that she was going to go ahead and return to her car. For the majority of the time, most people don't really check their surroundings when they're returning to their car because, again, nobody really thinks that anything bad was going to happen to them. Case in point to Kathleen, she didn't really think anything of it when she was returning back to her car, but unfortunately, that just didn't happen in this case. So shortly after returning to her car, that's when Michael, who had just gotten out of school, decided that he was going to come up from behind her and basically kind of hold her at gunpoint. So the way that the reports that I read basically said that he came up from behind her and had a gun and he placed it to her back. Michael then basically shoved her into the driver's seat and then kind of ran up front and then got into the passenger seat. It was in this moment when he decided to force Kathleen to drive to a wooded area nearby. Now, unbeknownst to Michael, Kathleen had an audio recorder on her, so she decided that she was going to go ahead and start recording the conversation once they arrived to the wooded area. The recording is said to be an excruciating 46 minutes in which Kathleen appears to be calm in order to compassionately reason with Michael during this time. Now again, Michael has no idea that this is being recorded. Michael told Kathleen that he was turning 17 tomorrow. He told Kathleen that he really, really wanted to get himself a car. And in fact, unbeknownst to Kathleen, he had told his friends prior that he really, really wanted a Toyota Camry. And if you guys can remember, Kathleen was driving a 1995 Toyota Camry. So this is when Kathleen tried to reassure to Michael that what he was doing was extremely wrong, but there was a way out of the situation. She tried reasoning with him and basically was just telling him hey, I can help you, you can help me, if you need a car, I can help you get a job. Stuff like that.
It was essentially her trying to reason with him in a way to not maybe anger him, to make something happen, escalate the situation worse than it already was. It was her, she was trying to be sensible about the situation because she really wanted to get out of this alive.
Right. And yeah, that's exactly what she was trying to do. And she even went so far as to say, hey, I will drive you to wherever your mom is at and we can talk about this together as adults, again.
It doesn't have to end bad.
Right, and she was trying everything she possibly could to get out of the situation. And in the midst of, basically having this one-on-one conversation with Michael, she was still somehow able to... So I don't know if you guys are familiar with cassette tapes or haven't seen one in a while, but whenever the film finishes, you have to flip it to the other side to continue recording, which is exactly what Kathleen did in that situation. So Kathleen was able to stop the recording, flip the tape, and then continue recording all without Michael knowing. So it's kind of crazy if you think about it. Kathleen then began to ask Michael questions, regarding his family, his background, if he had a job or if he was looking for a job and that stuff. And Michael then told her that he didn't have a job. And she was like, well, listen, I can help you find one. If you really want a car, I can help you find a job. Again, like Diego was saying, there's always a way out of the situation. Kathleen then began talking about herself, how she was a mom and she was a wife and that she really, really wanted to go see her family at the end of the day. She even was talking to Michael about God because she was a religious woman. And I guess she also hoped that Michael was religious. Kathleen then asked Michael, the hard-hitting questions as to why he felt the need to grab her by the neck and throw in broad daylight and then potentially kidnap her. I guess she wanted to know why he felt he would kidnap her in the middle of, a public parking lot. It's broad daylight. Certainly he should know that somebody was going to find him, right? Somebody was going to see this. Michael only explained to Kathleen that he wasn't able to show her the gun, which kind of makes people suspicious that he didn't have a gun to begin with, and he just kind of said he did just so he could frighten her. And then Michael proceeded to say that he couldn't show her the gun because he didn't want to get charged with armed kidnapping. But he was still kidnapping her and carjacking at the same time. Kathleen tried pleading with Michael that she just wanted to go home at the end of the day, but unfortunately Kathleen's pleas went unanswered when Michael then began to bound her arms and feet together and smother her with her own coat. Then Michael proceeded to dump her body in the woods along Garden State Parkway. And 3 days after, her murder, her body was discovered on Sunday, March 17th, 1996. In between those 3 days, Michael was seen driving the Toyota Camry, which belonged to Kathleen, around town. On Sunday, the same day that her body was discovered, friends of Michael's recall him taking a joyride to the Popcorn Park Zoo with several of his friends. And of course, when questioned by his friends where he got the car, Michael said that he bought the car for $800. But this leads us into chapter 3, which is the capture of Michael.
Okay, so on Sunday, March 17th, 1996, the police then began investigating the murder of Kathleen, and they were able to find out that she owned a Toyota Camry. And when the police saw a Toyota Camry similar to the one they were looking for parked in the complex where Michael lived, then they started asking questions. So the police brought in Michael for questioning, and they asked him, "Hey, where did you get your car from?" And Michael tells the police the same lie that he told his friends. He's like, "Well, I bought this car for $800. And at this point, the cops knew that Michael was lying because they had found the cassette. Now, this was obviously the incriminating evidence that told the cops everything they needed to know. So the police found that micro cassette that Kathleen had on her. They heard what was on the cassette before they even brought in Michael for questioning. So the police at this point already knew that Michael had killed Kathleen and stolen her car in the process. And so Michael got arrested and he opted out of a trial. So Michael pleaded guilty to felony murder, and he was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 60 years. So Ocean County prosecutor Daniel Carluccio, who heard the entire tape, had this to say: "It was not a horror story. It was not filled with terror. It was not filled with hysteria. It is a valiant effort by a woman who used every skill that she had. It was extraordinary. She cajoled, she challenged, she questioned, she counseled, she instructed, she pleaded. She did just about everything that you could do, not only to help herself, but to make human contact with her assailant." So that is a very good description there by the prosecutor from Ocean County, basically summarizing what me and Ashley were talking about a little while ago, where she was basically being as reasonable and calm-minded as you could be, trying to get her murderer to not commit what he eventually did, just to be more reasonable and sane-minded about it, just trying to make sure that he didn't,
Right.
escalate things out of control. Unfortunately, she wasn't able to convince him, and we know what happened.
Right. But I really did like how the cops listened to the tape prior to questioning Michael, because it kind of gave Michael the opportunity to just be open and honest about it, be like, yeah, I did kill her. But instead he chose to lie. So.
Well, the good thing is, if there's anything good to come out of this, it's that we know that Michael was caught because Kathleen had the, she was proactive about the situation she was in. She was active about it, and she was like, you know what? I don't know what's about to happen here, but I know I have this cassette on me, and I want to make sure that I can get as much information as I can without even knowing where it was going to lead to.
Yeah.
So, for what it's worth, her family does get justice in terms of the murderer being caught, because she was, smart enough to record what was going to happen. And so this leads us into chapter 4, the aftermath from the audio tape.
As for the audio recording, Paul, Kathleen's husband, has been fighting for more than a decade to keep the recording from surfacing to the public. In 1997, Paul and his attorney Carmine filed for a copyright of the audio recording. Now, according to reports that I read, this is actually the first time somebody has ever copyrighted an audio recording of this in this spectacle type of thing. Shortly after, the audio recording was leaked and was going to be played on air. But again, because Michael had copyrighted the audio, nobody at the time was able to leak it on air. So when word got out that the audio was going to be leaked on air, this is where, remember, attorney Carmine called the news station and had this to say. We have a copyright, and I am talking to you on the phone, and I am telling you, I will hold you personally responsible, and I will hold your organization responsible. He also had this to say about the protection of the recording. You've got to understand, Paul Weinstein is not a public person. He was not prepared for this kind of thing. Celebrities or politicians, they know how to deal with media attention. He's just a husband whose wife was killed. I know this tape is newsworthy and I know it's important, but when does the right of the media to sensationalize something override the rights of the family to their privacy? I stand with that. In 2004, an appeal panel of judges ruled that Michael had ineffectual counsel who coerced him into a plea deal due to his mother having a one-time romantic relationship with his previous defense attorney. So basically, in 1996, when he was arrested and went on trial, his attorney had opted not to go to trial and just told him to take a plea deal and then just, kind of plead guilty. Now, of course, in 2006, this is where the panel of judges were like, well, wait a second. The defense attorney was having an affair with his mom, so maybe to kind of sweeten the deal, maybe not take it to trial, let's just go ahead and plead guilty. So because of this, Michael was headed to court now because he was going to get a whole new resentencing. And that meant that the audio recording would have to be submitted for evidence because remember, in 1996, because he did not go to trial, the audio recording was not submitted for evidence. So basically the public had no power over it. But because he was now going to court, it was going to be submitted to evidence. So if you guys don't know, whenever evidence is submitted, it becomes public. Something Paul fought against really hard for more than a decade. During the trial, the judge, the lawyers, and Michael all wore headphones in order to listen to the audio recording. Kathleen's husband, Paul, didn't want the audio recording to become public. After listening to the audio recording, Michael's new ruling has him still serving a life sentence, but instead he will be eligible for parole after serving 45 years. In 2007, several news organizations, including the Associated Press, went to court to fight for the release of the tape. The judge only released transcripts of the recording. Now, in that same court case, the judge ruled that the much sought after recording would not, under any circumstances, according to the judge, be released to the media. In an interview with ABC News Law and Justice Unit, Paul had this to say. Now, this is Paul, the husband of Kathleen. Let's face it, it's a sensational story just the way it is. You can't write a better script. If there's not enough for a regular story there, the media will go for the tape, and that is too much for me. I didn't think anybody had the right to listen to what my poor wife went through in the last moments of her life. How much more sacred could something be? I agree. So because Paul decided, not to release the recording, he also basically turned down HBO Max special. He turned down every single talk show that reached out to him, and he even turned down a book deal. He just simply does not want to talk about this case, nor does he want to share the tape with anybody. He then had this to say, "My son has never listened to the tape. He should listen to it should he ever want to, before the world listens to it. It's the last thing my wife said to anybody, and out of respect for my wife, we tried to keep it off of every station in the country."
So this is something that's very, very big, especially in the world of entertainment media.
Yeah.
When they release something that just feels like it's a little bit too private to be sharing, because it's really insensible for the people who are actually involved.
Very.
In this particular case, we as a world have no right to decide, hey, we should have the right to listen to your wife's last words right before she got killed. If Paul, her husband, doesn't want it to be shared and has to fight for people to not get a hold of it because he thinks it's too private to him, and it's something that he doesn't want to make a huge like spectacle out of it. I mean, as you can see, as Ashley was talking about, he turns down HBO specials and talk shows because he doesn't want people to hear that tape. And you know what? It's within his very right to decide, no, this is my wife. This is very, very, very personal. This is the last thing she said to anybody before she was killed. Mm-hmm. And if he doesn't want to share that with anybody, you know what? That's his decision to make. It's not for us to be prying that information out of him.
Right, I agree. And as a society, we have to understand that there's certain things that we cannot listen to and we cannot watch.
And should not listen.
And should not, yeah. I mean, the fact that this man had to go to court because several news outlets were suing him for the rights of that tape is wild to me, because yes, I understand that once something is submitted into evidence, it becomes public, but there's just certain things, aka this tape, that we have no right over. I mean, think about it, guys. It was an excruciating 46 minutes of a woman basically like begging for her life and saying, listen, like, there is a way out of this. I can just imagine, like, maybe her voice was shaky, maybe she was crying, that it's personal. And yeah, I wouldn't want anybody listening to that tape if it had been my family members.
I was gonna say, the only case we have to make here, and it's pretty simple, is imagine if that was your wife.
Yeah, your mom.
If that was your mom, that was your sister, and she managed to record in her last moments right before she was killed, she managed to record the person who did it and her last words that she ever said.
Right.
You wouldn't want anybody to be able to access that, because that's so it's so personal, you know, and nobody, like, the people don't even know the wife or anything like that, so why should they have any right to be like, oh, you know what, I want to listen to it, so you're going to hand it over because it's public property. It's like, no, he gets to make that decision.
Right, and it's the fact that his son has never listened to the tape, so why should we?
Right, as Ashley was reading his one of his quotes here as we were wrapping up the story, the son hasn't listened to the tape, and should he ever want to listen to it, he has the right to listen to it before anybody else does. Right. That's his mom.
Exactly.
So yeah, that wraps up today's story, guys. It was a very, very, very interesting case, and very disturbing to know that, you know, people still, I don't know, I'm assuming, has there been any leaks of, there's transcripts released,
there's
right?
Transcripts released,
but the tape itself hasn't been listened to.
No, the only person who has the copy of it is Paul, and he has it locked away in somewhere, and if his son ever wanted to listen to it, he has access to it, and that's it.
Yeah, okay, and that's the way it should be, to be honest. So,
case closed.
Again, thank you guys for listening in to today's story. So we want to once again thank Jersey Bites 2 for today's story suggestion. And if you guys have any more suggestions for stories that you guys want us to cover here on the channel, feel free to drop those in the comments below. We're trying to, since we're still pretty small, we're trying our best to do a story on each one of the stories that are suggested here in the comment section.
Right, we got several.
We have 2 that are lined up right now, one of them being Gabby Petito and the other one being Israel Keys. Mm-hmm. And so those are going to be our next 2 episodes. But I do want to end today's episode by saying that we are taking next week off. August is really, really busy for us. We have a lot of birthdays and stuff, and we're going to be out of town a lot. But thank you guys for tuning in once again, and we will catch you guys in the next wrapped up episode, episode 9. Peace.
Bye.